to Our Future is Kind, a podcast exploring how we build the future we want to live in, one kind act at a time. I'm your host, Michael G. Neece, president of Our Future is Kind, and your trusted companion as we search out kindness strategies we can use in our everyday lives. Together, as we chase the idea of building a kinder future, we will interview experts in kindness, team building, human motivation, corporate culture building, relationships, plus politicians, artists, and those with a vision for a healthy and kind future, one we all want to live in and deserve to enjoy together. In addition to interviews, we will consider positive depictions of humanity's future in art, literature, movies, and media. And we will issue kindness challenges each week, give an update about Our Future is Kind, the company, and what it's doing to stay true to its mission. So, let's dive in. Welcome to Our Future is Kind podcast. I'm very excited about today's guest, Kevin Khuntting. I'm really excited to be able to share another believer, another guardian of kindness. Let me just tell you a little bit about Kevin before we dive into the interview. So Kevin Khuntting is the transition expert with over 20 years of Fortune 500 corporate marketing experience, including roles at GE, Gap, Fossil Group, and consulting for the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, D.C. Transitions have been a constant theme throughout his life and career. And from launching his coaching practice in 2021 to navigating significant personal milestones, his journey has been defined by embracing the unknown and turning challenges into opportunities for growth. At 19, he took the life-altering step by coming out to his parents. It's a moment that taught him to move through fear and uncertainty with courage. And since then, he's faced transformative life transitions, including relocating for career opportunities, leaving behind the familiar to follow his heart, and living internationally after marrying his husband, a career diplomat. These experiences shaped his belief that transitions, though challenging, can lead to profound growth, resilience, and alignment with our deepest values. Kevin, I am so excited to have you here today.
Thank you. Likewise.
Yeah, what an amazing background you have. There are 30 things that I want to ask you and talk about. I know we have a very limited time. So just if you were to introduce yourself to everybody here in Our Future is Kind land, what are the essential things that make you, you?
I'd say this is something that I've learned over time, but what makes me me is someone who really does go in a lot of bold directions and has always sort of gone after what it is that I've wanted. Now, I would say that the inner part of who I am was scared in many of those situations. Like it's normal to feel that way, but it has been, I think my career trajectory as well as my life trajectory has always allowed me to step into big opportunities, as well as whether personal again or professional, but to do so knowing, I think not even knowing that I'm going to there's a huge benefit in embracing it, because there always typically is, but just the idea that, you know what, I've done it. I've embraced those moments. They, yes, scared me in many ways, in different ways as well, but I think that's what really sets me apart is I've never been afraid. I don't think that fear is something that we all experience, but it's also like I've come to befriend fear in my life.
Oh, I love that. I love that concept of befriending fear. It's, I guess, familiar and you don't shy away from it.
Mm-mm.
That's great.
It's taken me a while to kind of keep embracing it more and more, because of course those first big steps that I took early on in my career, it wasn't easy. I mean, it definitely isn't easy, and it never really is, but I think what I've also learned is how important what we think and really our own individual perspective can allow us to manage through that in let's say, a healthier way than, let's say, maybe a not so healthy way.
Right. Gosh, you have made so many leaps and jumps across international borders and from one phase of life into another. One of the things that you and I talked about in the past, because we've chatted about kindness and how to bring more of it into the world. One of the things that you've mentioned to me in the past is that you see kindness as a practice that requires intention. And I'm just wondering if you can expound on that, because I always find that a fascinating take on what kindness is.
Yeah, I mean, what I recognize is that many of us, if you think about how we see our world, whether it's our perspectives, our beliefs, are definitely shaped during our younger years, our more formidable years with our parents, maybe fellow community members, people that are close to us that we trust. And as much as we'd like to think that all of us maybe understand or even have seen kindness being modeled in our lives, that's not the case. I think it's quite a spectrum of. Many of us have seen kindness in action, whether it be through our own parents, again, fellow spiritual community members, or anyone that we're close to. But that's why I say it takes intention, is because many of us, I don't think that wasn't modeled. And so kindness is there for all of us, I believe, to tap into. Of course, it's a part of the human experience. But I think that if we are all really committed to wanting a kinder, more compassionate world, the path to get there has to be through us being more intentional about living that way and sort of practicing this idea of kindness. Sometimes it comes naturally, like let's say in a situation where you find yourself in a local grocery store, and you're extending your kindness to not only maybe your fellow shoppers, but also the cashier or the person who rings you up, right? But I know there's moments where, I've seen people not extend kindness in those situations because they're either in a rush or they feel that they've been, they're not getting the service that they receive. And so I think if you really bring it down to like the micro individual level, I think each one of us can bring more kindness in our day if we just become more intentional about being kind. And that takes practice. That actually takes effort.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. There are moments where you observe unkind interactions that are going on, and we are even tempted to step into the unkindness ourselves. Mm-hmm. Do you have any special secret sauce for how to keep yourself sort of primed so that you are not putting on a smile and being fake about it, but so that you are genuinely trying to reach for those rich, warm parts of your heart and then trying to be kind when you're really not feeling it, when it's hard?
That's a great question. Again, the intentionality has to be at the forefront. And one of the main things that I do with many of my clients is you can simply just check in with yourself any moment throughout your day by asking yourself, what am I feeling? Just what am I feeling in this moment? Which I think is one step, because it kind of acknowledges if you're feeling that anger or that frustration, you can at least understand that that's what I'm experiencing, so that then it gives you the opportunity to maybe ask a next question, which is, well, who do I want to be in this moment? Who is it that I want to show up as in this moment, and what would be more beneficial to me? Because typically when we're angry or we're upset or we're frustrated or worried, honestly, if you look at really what the outcome typically is that it doesn't really benefit us at all. It really is either going to result in some confrontation, maybe a conflict, and really it might feel good in the moment. And I don't even know if you were really processing things in the moment where we think it feels good or bad, or we're even assigning any value to it. But certainly after the fact, when we walk away from those moments, I think is when sometimes we're like, wow, that was just not a great show. I can't believe I showed up like that. Or, right, I can't believe I said what I said to this individual. That's not who I am. And we say that, right? In the moment, we're like, but that's not who I am. And so I think if even before, you can sort of prep yourself for any situation by even saying, who is it that I want to be in this situation? And that can kind of get your head thinking in the direction of, definitely, if you want to be kind, right? You prep yourself mentally for that is what my experience is going to be, because I've done the mental preparation. Or even if you can, I think what's interesting is these are such, again, micro moments, but right, you're standing in line. Let's say you're trying to return something. I'm thinking of those moments where all of our levels of frustration typically can just keep going, like it's a pressure steamer, right? Like we're waiting and we're like, God, I just want to get this done. Again, stepping back and maybe giving yourself that perspective of, well, wait, who is it that I want to be in this moment? And why am I even getting so upset? Again, there's a lot of internal dialogue here, but I think that the most important piece to communicate is that it's building the awareness of, again, what it is that you're experiencing, but then more importantly, what do I want to experience? Yeah. And that what do I want to opens the door for, you know what, I want to show up in a respectful, kind way to this individual or to my spouse or to my fellow work colleague. Because you know what, that's how I want to feel. I want to feel really good about not only myself, but also give the person the respect that they deserve because they're my colleague or they're my spouse or my son or my daughter. It's tough. It's because, and you know why it's tough? And this is where I think there's more opportunity for all of us. It requires thinking and work, which is work for many of us. And most of us, I think we've talked about this, are just on autopilot. We don't even think about this stuff.
Right. Yeah, it is very clear to me that you and I think about these things in similar ways. I always like to think of the human self as being an emotional creature who occasionally has a cogent thought, right? We all want to think that we're thinking creatures who occasionally have an emotion, but I just don't think that that's it. I think we are programmed to feel everything all the time. And it's so funny because I've been approached by different people who are, like, why do I have to care about this? And, this is terrible. And this is fluffy. We don't need this. And the people who usually say it to me are usually saying it with a little bit of heft, a little bit of that, like they're frustrated and they're angry. And I'm like, you're not even aware of the emotions you're bringing to the conversation when you're trying to put down the idea of kindness. Clearly you've been hurt. And clearly you haven't been shown the kindness that you feel like you deserve. And it's I love the fact that you frame all of this in intentionality and that aspirational, aspect of like, how do I become the person I want to become in this moment? Love that.
I mean, if you're really ready to take this to the next level, I talk about this in leadership, which it applies in our personal lives, is that you could really create what I call like your own personal dashboard, like your own sort of self-leadership dashboard about what are those areas that you want to focus on more, let's say within a framework of time. It could be the next month, the next 3 months, year. And if kindness is an area that you would like to be practicing more in your life, that's exactly how you could approach it, is to start to think about, well, what does kindness mean to me? And then start to define it in a way in which you're like, and what would help me experience that more? Like, what would allow me to do that? And then simply outline what those things are and then act on it, which is easier said than done because, again, it takes some effort. But it's a great way of thinking about how can I actually bring this more into the world? And it's funny, I talk about this in leadership as well, that I'm like, where's your leadership KPIs? I mean, we have our revenue, we have our, whether you're in HR, employee attrition, we have all these great KPIs that we measure, but I'm like, but where's your leadership KPI? Where's the KPI to develop greater compassion as a leader? How are you actually going to do that? And let's talk about what would make that real in your day-to-day. And I think that's the gap that you and I talk about, that again, if we all could just be a little bit more, you don't even have to take a big step. It could just be one small baby step forward. Imagine what difference it could make if just more people were doing that. If at the total level, more people were acting in this way.
That's lovely. And the idea that more people acting out of intentional kindness, that fits in beautifully with the theme of Our Future is Kind. This podcast is really focused on two things. It's kind of one thing, but it's really two things, I guess. The first is that we want to think about what should the future look like, because you can't hit a target if you don't have a target. So establishing what should it look like. And the other big piece of that is, what are the actions, the brave acts of courage, the systems that we need to put in place so that we are being kind, we're thinking intentionally about kindness. How do we build that future? So let's start with these two things, if you'll indulge me. Envision with me right now, Kevin, that it is 2125. And all of our listeners are so excited to hear how you envision it, because we want to live in that kinder future. We want to live in that better place. So skip the flying cars. Tell me, who is showing up? How are we interacting? If you want to talk about the flying cars, that's too. I know AI is on everybody's minds, but how do we exist as people in the year 2125?
The way that I would view it is that I would hope that many of us first allow ourselves to give ourselves our own sense of kindness. So to treat ourselves with greater kindness. I think it starts, again, at the micro level and then works outward. So that, again, is a whole topic in itself, because I do see that if you look at our culture today, in order to get there, there is a lot of work to be done around both from a therapeutic, so on the therapy side, as well as even coaching, but the two different modalities actually work very nicely together. But many people it's hard to be kind, I think. It's really difficult to make those movements forward if you are stuck in, I'd say, your own sense of trauma, whatever that trauma is. And a lot of times when I say that, it's the relationship between probably someone beating themselves up day to day or judging themselves, which is at the crux of a lot of it. Of course, the situations are very specific based on someone's own personal experience, but what the connection is that it's really hard to find that self-compassion or kindness if that's something that's always sort of leading you daily. If it's the trauma that's leading you, it's really, really hard to tap into it. It makes it more challenging, I think. Not impossible, but just more challenging. So I would see it as a path where many of us are doing that work. We understand that, each of us is beautiful and unique in our own way. And there is so much value in that, first and foremost. Like just the value of being who you are, being authentically you. And that's a process in itself to understand. So I think that's where it all starts. And hopefully what I see is that many of us are those courageous warriors who are willing to step into that space and figure that out and figure out who we are, so that then we can start to bring that to our local communities. So then it extends out, I think, into local communities where we are modeling that behavior, and we're modeling the behavior in a way that it actually hopefully inspires other people, or it elicits something, a response in someone else, because we've all seen that if we are being really kind or compassionate, it really can create a space with another human being where conversations are flourishing, right? You're able to move past some of the basics about what do you do, or maybe what political group are you affiliated with, which really isn't that important. But what I'm saying is it allows a space for us to see the humanity in one another. And I think that that's also where I see hopefully things moving, is we're able to embody that more and embrace it and understand that there is so much beauty that each of us possess. And if we're doing it with kindness and compassion, that there's a certain bond and connectedness that can start to unfold, that in itself can be life-changing and even life-saving, I think, for many people. So if that could just keep building, expanding outwards, I really see hopefully a culture and society that is funny. Imagine if you could think of that, if the people in America and the United States were leading with compassion, if the ultimate goal was to have a culture that was based on compassion, I'd put the question out to the audience that's listening: what do you think would be required? What do you think could flourish as a result of that? And that's what I would see, is that type of a society and culture. I think anything's possible if we're operating from more of that type of a level of energy, or a level of consciousness, as I like to call it, versus today's world, where it kind of feels like all we hear about is right? It's either you versus me or us versus them. Everything seems to be very, quote, seen as black or white or right or wrong. And really, there's so much more space to play in that I think allows for kindness to flourish if we all just would believe in that. If we believed in it and we acted accordingly, that's how it would get created.
So in your version of the future, which I love, by the way, it's one where we are really looking inward first. That's a big piece of it. And so I'm envisioning, it's 21, 25, pretty much everybody has access to the therapy that they need, maybe to some really good coaching. They have the idea of how they can be guided in life by having reflection and having these conversations. And then you mentioned that if we could see it in each other, if we could see the value and the true essence, the beauty in each other, that's another big piece of it. So I love both of those components coming together. You now live internationally, right? You're in Mexico City, is that right?
I'm in Mexico City, which culturally is very different. It is talking about this topic. Yeah. I do find it to be a bit more. There is more kindness. Interestingly enough, it's a very family-based culture. Like, family is very important, as are many families in the United States as well. And not to say that they aren't, but it's the level of just people greet you every single day. People say good morning to you. People say good afternoon when it's the afternoon. People will always address you in a really typically positive way, even regardless of whatever the situation is. And when you think that there's 20 plus million people living here, you might think it's the reverse, but really in my day-to-day, I can tell you that really people will extend themselves to someone else in need, I think, much quicker here, or be willing to step up and give them the help or to help them out when needed. Now, granted, I grew up in the Midwest, so I will say that shout out to all my fellow Midwesterners that I know, in living in other areas of the United States, people have clearly told me, sorry, my phone's going off.
You have a big fan club, I get it.
It's that, that they're like, you guys we are quite unique, that we're pretty kind people from the Midwest, that we are definitely the type of people that if you had a flat tire, we would help you change the tire, but yeah, it's really a unique experience here. And I think it's allowed me to open my eyes to see also what's possible in terms of, again, that just the shared humanity that all of us really have on this planet together.
Shared humanity is such a great phrase, because when you really think about it, we are here for such a short time. We are lucky to be here at all, and then we're even luckier to have each other. And so when you talked about, us versus them and you versus me and, all right and wrong, I think people do get caught up in that. There's something that keys into a part of ourselves that wants us to be right. And to be on that winning side and to say ha on all you people who don't believe it. Are there ways of us overcoming that with kindness? Are there ways of us reaching across to the people who say, no, you're wrong? Is there a way of doing that?
I know it'd be tough, but funny, this is a topic that comes up in coaching a lot. And the idea, you're right, that so many people attach a sense of almost like value or sense of self-worth, I think, when they really enjoy being right, or if they're really being honest with themselves, that is what they believe, is that I need to be right, or I want to be right. But if you, in any type of an environment, it's interesting that I think that's a deeper reflection of, again, who the person might be versus anything. And I would challenge it. I think, funny enough, I kid myself that I'm like, wow, if I found myself back in a large, corporate Fortune 400 brand, I think my experience would be so different now based on what I've been armed with, the insights that I've gathered as a coach, the education that I attained. Like, there's so many different ways that I think I would approach it by saying, well, how do you know that you're right? And usually tends to unfold is it is a subjective measure based on the individual who wants to be right. There's no absolute truth or measurement around making someone right. And funny in team dynamics, this is why it's really important, I think, to understand what that means. It doesn't mean that the person's right. It probably means that it's the person with maybe the largest or biggest title or the decision maker in the room that is saying that's right, that's quote unquote right, but it doesn't mean that that's absolute. It just means we've decided that, you know what, we're going to go with what you just shared. That's basically, if you strip away the right or wrong and the judgment around it, that's really what's happening is we've just decided that we are going to make that decision. Now, is it the best decision? Questionable. But what I can tell you is it's through the implementation of whatever the decision is that the company will come to realize the value of that decision. Make sense? Like, absolutely, yeah. You'll find out whether you're like, wow, we should have done this way. And that's really what organizations are doing. It's interesting. So I would challenge people if you're a person out there who first off needs to be right, you might start to ask yourself, what is it about being right that is so important to you? Right. It's probably tied up more with an ego or something at that level than it is. And it might be also something that's getting in the way of someone becoming a really effective leader. It might be something that is, for lack of a better word, disempowering them versus empowering them as a leader.
Right. Yeah. In some consulting work that I've been doing lately, what I have found is that the leader is really good at hearing me. But he also has very strong preferences. And I get that. And so when we speak, I always try to present it as you have these options. And any of these could work. I've seen this one work. I've seen this other one work. This one's a Hail Mary, probably not a good idea, but what's your preference? But then I also encourage him to involve others in that decision because we're stronger together, right? And you hired these people with great skills and experience for a reason. And so I love what you are saying to our audience, and especially the leaders in this audience, about really interpreting why am I acting the way that I'm acting? Why do I believe that being right is so important? And why do I have to, make this particular decision? Yeah, dissecting the decision and why you are so not beholden to it, but wedded to that decision, I think is really great advice. Yeah.
And just to add on, one other piece that I always bring it back to with my clients as well is it sort of strips away the ego, because so much of us, it's natural, I think, for many, especially senior business leaders, to lead with ego. And ego is a really dangerous place to lead from. I'd say dangerous because in many ways it's tied to the personal, like something personal, versus what do we believe is in the best interest of the organization? Or what do I believe is in the best interest of my entire leadership team, right? If you start to the more you can strip yourself away from, I think, the decision that has to be made and bring it back to truly the business, it's golden. That's where it creates that space, versus if it's someone really wrapped up in it because this is about me, or this is, I'm in this, and they may not be aware of it. That's what's funny, is many leaders are acting, I think, either subconsciously, they may not even recognize it. It might be that, like, what about this decision is about you, or what about this decision that you're about to choose, or your preference, is really about the betterment of the entire organization. And sort of, I know we talk the same language as well, so kind of that can help a leader too, to say, like, wow, maybe I just need to take a step back here and think this through, because certainly if it's more ego-based, I can tell you that the organization's going to pay a price. There's going to be a cost to it.
Right. Yeah, it is fascinating trying to get in the head of different leaders, because you and I have both been in leadership roles, and you can feel very much in the spotlight, very exposed and very vulnerable, because if the decisions that are implemented don't work out well, all of the eyes turn towards you to say what went wrong and how did this go. So I think we're sort of giving the same advice to leaders, which is, well, if those eyes come back to you and you were really firm about a decision and you didn't consult anybody else, well, now it really is on you. Whereas if you've consulted with the smartest minds that you've got and the most experienced people on your team, well, now you can at least say, well, we explored these different options. This is what we thought was the absolute best way to go. Yeah, I made the final decision, but we made sure to explore the options. And there's always risk with anything. So
totally. And just to bring this back to kindness, I would argue regardless of the outcome, it really would be up to that leader to also bring it back to, well, how are you going to show yourself some kindness when this goes off exactly as it was supposed to, or even better than anticipated, or wow, this didn't quite land as I thought it was going to, and we really have more opportunity for growth, meaning maybe it wasn't the best decision. I think that's where this idea of kindness comes into play too, is how healthy is it going to be for that leader to spend time beating themselves up because they maybe made not the best decision?
Right, or a decision that just it had good odds and it didn't work out. Yeah,
it's total right. But I feel like that is any business, right? The evolution of a business is a series of decisions. Really, that's what's happening. There's decisions, there's implementation of those decisions, and then it's what did I learn? What can we carry forward that we think will benefit the organization, or what needs to change as a result? And I think that is really what the essence of any business is that's operating is the. And kindness to me plays a key role throughout all of those actions, corresponding decisions, and the idea of extending ourselves the kindness of, probably arguing we did the best that we could in the context in which we had to make a decision.
Yeah, it is a fascinating function of any business. I think the more kindness you see available to everybody within, and the more people shine that kindness inward at themselves, I think the more you've increased your odds of having great success within the entire business. So I love this conversation. We should have you back on the show so we can talk more about that. But I wanted to turn the conversation just slightly. In this vision of the future, it is my belief that we have to do very courageous acts of kindness to get there. And if you look at, say, the 1970s or the 1980s, there were people who had to be incredibly brave to step outside of the norms of society to really get people, to see each other and to value each other and to be kind to each other. What do you think those next big challenges are? What are those next big brave acts of kindness that we need to take on so that we can build the future that you and I here in 2025 that we're hoping to see in 10 years, 20 years?
This is a great observation and question, and it makes me think of is it's someone who I think fills me up and has always filled me up in so many ways, and at least from what I understand and have read, when I think about Martin Luther King Jr., to me, this is an individual who was I would say such a standout even historically, and I would say even present day, because and this is leading to me to say that we really lack leaders like Martin Luther King Jr. We really lack individuals, I think, who possess a platform and operate from a way of seeing the world where he was standing for something so much bigger than himself. Again, his ego was the furthest, I would say, the furthest place away from what he envisioned for the world and for humanity. That's why it was groundbreaking. And it touched people in so many different ways because it was that big. I mean, it was someone who stood for something that could get you killed, was powerful, was believing in the equality of all people, regardless of the color of their skin. And for me, I can tell you that there's not a day that goes by that when I haven't read his speech, that it moves me so profoundly. But I believe that the one element that I see that he possessed too was he was deeply spiritual. He had a very deeply spiritual connection, which I think is that was the X factor. Like, that's one of the factors that really, I think, grounded him, kept him grounded, was there is something greater. There is something so much bigger than what I even understand. And that really gave him, I think, a perspective. But I bring that back to, who is that person? I think we need more people like that. And it is disheartening to say, but it's hard. It's hard when that's not being modeled, when what's being held up, when we see in our daily news cycles, or what we see in our local media. It's just, that's not what's being put on a pedestal. What's being put on pedestals, I think, is the opposite. And so we all have a responsibility in this. And even I now that you got me thinking, I mean, definitely the big media players have a huge role in this. We need more shows. We need more spaces. We need more advertisements, anything that allows us to illuminate this idea of what the power is of being kind and compassionate, as also a viable path to whatever it is that we want in our lives, versus, I'm going to take you down at every cost, or, I'm right and you're wrong and you're going to pay for it. I mean, that's the stuff that we see playing out every single day. And so I think about our kids, and I'm like, my God, is this what, if this is what they're seeing, they're learning from, they're sort of understanding that this is the value that we place in our culture, it's a tough path. It's not an easy path. So I think the work that you're doing, Michael, the work that I do, I know that it seems very micro. I also see there's so much value. And that's what I would say to anyone in our audience, is that if this is your focus, keep doing what you're doing in your corner of the world, because it all adds up at more of a macro level. But it'd be interesting to know, like, who is this? We need that leader. We need, who comes to mind, who probably, to me, embodies this, is Michelle Obama.
Oh, yeah.
She's a woman who, just through her words, I think even her presence, you feel her energy. There's something just really uplifting about who she is. And I know many people may disagree with me, but that, for me, that's my personal experience, is I see her as really a beacon. And it's interesting because any of us, it's an opportunity for any of us. And it's an opportunity in calling for every single one of us of what is holding us back from stepping into that. Again, what could I be doing at a local level that would help me create a more kinder or more compassionate community that I live in, or even being a neighbor to your neighbor. It's interesting because I sometimes ask myself the question, we don't sometimes, I think, as civilians, as like American citizens, sometimes ask ourselves the question is, what is my role? What is my role in what the world that I would want to live in? And if the world that we want to live in is, I really want to see more kindness and decency and compassion, well, each one of us have to embody it, or else it will never come to life. It's not, that's when it becomes still a dream. The only way dream becomes reality is through action.
I love the fact that you started with, we need this great grand figure, which we do. We need braver people in public life. We do. There are some. And I think Michelle Obama is absolutely one of those. In her spare time, she is helping build young leaders. And I mean, anybody who's spending their time trying to build up youth, or trying to, overcome some wrong that has been done. I mean, anybody who spends their time doing that, my heart goes out to them, and I'm a big fan. But I love that you started with that, and then came to we all have some power here, people. We can all do, be a neighbor to your neighbor. I love that thought. You can do simple, easy things and shine as a small light in that room. And then over time, as I think you build up that kindness practice, I think that you can shine brighter over time and be an inspiration for other people to follow. So I know that's one of the things that attracted me into your circle to begin with, was just the work that you are doing, coaching people in terms of, career growth, and thinking about how is kindness playing into it. That's how I think we're going to get to the future that we all need. It's with the kinds of work, that you are doing. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we have a couple of other things that we always love to discuss on the Our Future is Kind podcast. One of those is what inspires you. Do you have a TV show that you reach for? Is there a movie? Is there somebody's blog that you always read? A podcast? What is it that really gets you excited about, man, the world is turning out great. Man, we're going to get there.
I'd say recently, just most recently in the news cycle, this really stuck with me. And these were two younger entrepreneurial women in LA, that's just based on the current situation that is still unfolding in Los Angeles. I think it's their organization. It's a nonprofit called Baby to Baby. And it's two very young women who are running this nonprofit and have literally decided that, they partnered with, I think it's 400 plus different organizations within LA to provide new mothers or mothers to really, with the formulas, diapers, just for completely free, but, just giving away all of this to really new moms who have been affected by what's unfolding has been something that warmed my heart. I just thought one of the things that came to mind was I was thinking, it always seems to be the case, but why do things have to get really bad for us to show up for one another? And we need to during those times, of course. It makes the logical sense. But I think where the opportunity is for me on the flip side, which is, well, how can we continue to show up for one another even when there isn't a major tragedy or something where, there's a fires, earthquake, tsunamis, hurricanes? How can we start to build more of a culture of just showing up for one another even when things aren't that way? But that was just something that stuck with me recently that, again, warmed my heart. I'm a person who's attached to nature, and so I'd say that I find anything that's in the natural world, especially animals. I love in the morning. I live in a place where luckily I have hummingbirds that come daily at a feeder that I have out front on my porch. And that's just a small moment for me that fills me with a lot of gratitude and joy. And it's fun to start my day off. But I'd say that nature in general for me can be very grounding. And grounding in the sense of, again, I think a lot of times I'm questioning, how did this species even get created? When you think about all the different species of birds, reptiles, mammals, it's actually, for me, it's awe-inspiring to think all of this is a part of what I call creation. And it's magnificent, and it really is bewildering to me that I was we live on such a beautiful planet that hopefully we can all continue to nurture. Because I think it's all interrelated. I don't think that anything exists for not a reason. And so I'd say nature for me plays a real big role in my keeping grounded. I think a sense of gratitude, and gratitude to me is directly related to kindness. Is that, again, just having gratitude for who I am, for what I have, the people who make up my life, my family, my close friends, all of that, and never not to lose sight of it. So that just comes to mind as well when you ask the question.
Kevin, I love all of these practices. The idea of getting out into nature. Everybody who's listening in or watching this podcast, I hope that you have taken down some notes and some very granular things that you can do today. You can go out on a walk. You can go observe nature. You can tune into what's going on in the world around you and disaster relief efforts. I think that is also really huge. But then you mentioned something that we all think about once in a while. We say, gosh, I should do that. I should really think about that. And that's gratitudes. I don't know how many people wake up and list out gratitudes. It's part of my daily practice to write down 3 things that are unique, that I haven't listed in a long time, that really make me feel very happy to be here on Earth. So I thank you very much for highlighting all of those things for our listeners. What are the big projects that you're working on right now, and how can people reach you? Because I think people want to have more conversation with you. I sure do after this. So what are you working on, and how can we get in touch?
Okay, buddy, I was going to bring this up to you after this because I have an idea for a project, but I was like, oh my God, Michael would be the perfect person to partner with, because I'd love to have a partner in this. Funny, I'll put that out there, that if what I'm about to share with you speaks to you and you would love to be a part of it, by all means, let's connect. And I know, Michael, you'll be sharing, I think, the ways in which people can connect with me. But
Sure. Yeah.
I've had this idea since last year about creating, I'd say like an event. I see it as an event. It certainly can expand into something different. But the idea would be to be creating spaces where people come together to learn how to be kind. I know that sounds odd to say, but it's really a space where I see it being, keynote speakers, some experts in the field of kindness, compassion, but then also a lot of breakouts and ways in which people would actually do work. We would do some amazing work together, facilitated type work, where the idea is really understanding how can we build and help create a greater sense of kindness and compassion and shared community, meaning that all of those come together. And then you would leave, of course, this conference, it could be a day, it could be 2 days. You would leave this conference, of course, with the idea being that you would take all of this back to your local communities and create sort of action plans within your own local spaces where this can continue to hopefully flourish and grow. And so I have a lot more sort of spelled out in a deck that I put together that I'd love to share with you, Michael, but it's, I just feel that I feel like there aren't spaces anymore. I haven't seen any where that really is the focus. Is this idea of helping us see each other and seeing us see each other in a way where we do it from a place of kindness and compassion versus, you're different than I am. We would never get along. You would never understand me. I'm so tired of hearing how we love to separate and make ourselves feel different from one another when we have so much more in common as human beings, regardless of however we want to define ourselves. And I feel like that's where there's real power and empowerment for really what you've envisioned too when you talk about the future. So, it is a project. I've been sitting on it because I'm like, I've been struggling, to be perfectly honest, to figure out how do I get this off the ground.
Right.
And I have a lot of it spelled out, but I'd love to share it with you. And
count me in. I'm going to say, count me in.
Anyone else out there, that would love to be a part of this, that plays in this space, by all means, I'd love to see this get off the ground.
Wonderful. Yeah, that is an amazing idea, and it sounds like a big kindness party, but also maybe a kindness focus group. Like we could actually build the future that we want to live in, one kind act at a time, starting there. Sounds amazing.
That is the idea. I mean, it's funny. I dream it because that's what it speaks to my soul. I know it speaks to your soul as well. And I don't, it's hard for me, it'd be hard for anyone to argue, and I'd love for you to come forward as well, to say that what would be the alternative? I think that's always what I ask myself. Well, what is the alternative, right? If we continue to sort of go on the path that we see we're going down, where is it going to lead us? I don't think anyone really benefits.
Right. Yeah, war and acrimony and zombie apocalypse is what comes to mind. Yeah.
Exactly. And so I'll send it to you once we end this. I will definitely send it to you, and I'd love to get your take, and maybe we'll see what happens next.
Sounds wonderful. All right, so those of you who are out there listening to our Future is Kind podcast, this was Kevin Khuntting, our special international guest for the day and master of kindness. Once again, thanks so much, Kevin, for being with us. This episode's kindness challenge. Since recording this episode, Kevin and I have started working on a kindness summit that we've provisionally called UnityCon. Your challenge is to reach out to us and give us your suggestions on what this celebration of kindness might look like. Anyone you think we should invite as presenters or sponsors, and ask to get involved if you have time, energy, and interest. We'd love to have you on this ride. Look for more details coming out soon. Want to stay inspired about building that great new future? Number 1, get involved with Baby to Baby, a charitable organization focused on providing children living in poverty with necessities. This is inspirational work. 2, get out in nature. The interconnectedness of us with our environment is indisputable, so go experience it for yourself. 3, practice gratitudes. If you want to be truly inspired, remembering what you have to be thankful for is a great place to start. Thanks again for listening to our Future is Kind podcast, a podcast in search of a kinder future. Go out there and do something kind.